Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Let me do this little quick intro. I'm so excited for us to be on this call tonight. I just want to say welcome, everyone who's tuning in right now on Facebook, and thank you for tuning into this pop-up edition of MSR Forefront, where we are committed to authentic conversations with elected officials, organizations, and thought leaders on issues that are pertinent to Black communities in Minnesota and beyond. Of course, I'm your host, Stefanetta, and tonight we are talking education. That's disparities, how they are tied to larger issues of social, racial, and economic justice, and how we can engage, empower, and educate not only youth, but parents and leaders in closing this gap that systemically is not set to close on its own, right? I'd like to welcome our guests this evening. We have Kevin Lindsey, CEO of the Minnesota Humanities Center. Hey, how are you? We have Niila Hebert, Senior Manager, Volunteer Relations for Girl Scouts River Valleys and AALF Education. She's a member of the AALF Education Task Force. And we have Rose McGee, Humanities Officer for Minnesota Humanities Center. Good evening. How are you all?
Great evening. Doing great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I am so glad you were able to hop on this conversation so we can really get into nitty gritty about what's happening in Minnesota, right? We understand.
Yes.
Understand. Minnesota's great if you're on the outside. It's great, top 10 of everything. It's perfect. It's whatever, unless you're Black, Indigenous, person of color. We're struggling, right? And it's a gap that's widening. It's not just standing still. Even as the numbers go up for the people of color in Minnesota, even the number of teachers stays the same. Like that 5-6%, how does that level out? And so right now, before we even get into it all the way, I just want to do a quick check-in, right? Mm-hmm. Tell me how you are doing tonight, because this is still a pandemic. And we have a lot going on. So if we could just do a quick check-in tonight. And then if you could just tell me what role does education play in the work that you do? So I think that's how we can check in tonight. Just like how do you see education in the work that you do? What role? So who would like to start? Okay, well, Kevin got a whole background. We're gonna start with Kevin.
Kevin Red.
The whole background. That's funny. So good evening. I feel a lot better about the direction of the country than I did tonight, than I did on Monday. And I was really, as many people were, impressed by the young poet laureate that addressed the crowd. Yes. That was just fantastic.
Yes.
That really set the right tone. And I think it's even a good frame for this conversation, is that where we've had problems in the past, where we stumbled, where we've fallen short, that doesn't mean we have to stay there, but we have to be committed to understanding how we got there and then set a course in a direction in a positive way and move forward. So I'm hopeful. A lot more hopeful again than I was on Monday night. And I think that the Minnesota Humanities Center, in partnership with school districts that we work with, professional development opportunities with teachers, we see this as critically important. But we know that education does not just simply lie in the classroom. Right. So when we are doing education for the whole community, such as we did with the commemoration of the lynching in Duluth, and we're talking about the idea of people abandoning the rule of law and police officers standing aside because they don't want to spill the blood of white individuals and allowing 3 people to be lynched. Having that echo to the events on January 6th and explaining that this is an issue that we can't shy away from, can't turn away from, we have to do something about that. So for us, it is very much front and center for us, a just society that's curious, connected, and compassionate. Curious, coming to conversations, open hearts, open minds, connected, as Dr. King says, seeing ourselves tied into a garment of mutual destiny, and compassionate, wanting to act and move beyond empathy to actual action.
That's it.
Nice. Okay, well, Niila, you snapping.
How could you not? Thank you.
Right? Empathy.
Yes.
Asking, yes.
Yes. All of those things right there. For me, I'm charged up. I'm charged up, after listening to the lovely poet, Amanda, and just, and just how she expressed so just artistically and articulately where we really are. And, she has me charged up for what all of our young Black scholars can do. Because just like she said, she might imagine herself being the president, but here she is, reciting a poem for a president. And just so many different spaces where our youth can see themselves, really see themselves. That's what we want to create. We want to create the path so that you can see yourself in the future you, what's next for you. And, education is everybody's job. And that's what we focused on in partnering with such a fantastic organization as Minnesota Humanities, because they do that work. And it was just such a natural fit to say, listen, we know that education doesn't just belong to educators. And in many instances, it doesn't just belong to caretakers. Also, that child has to see themselves as someone who can learn, who can achieve, who can be successful. And, it takes all of us. And so my involvement with education is really just reminding ourselves that wherever we are now, there was a village, a community, a group that helped us to get there. And so now we are charged with being that community, that village, and that group. And I'm ready.
Thank you. See, look, so you hopeful. Kevin, Niila is charged up. And Ms. Rose, on your end as well, how are you feeling, and what role does education play for you?
Well, the word for me is onward, which is one that I carry with me a lot. I work, as I say to people, my day job is with Minnesota Humanities as a humanities officer. And my role is that which helps to provide professional development to educators and families and students. That is something that I don't take lightly. Professional development. What does that mean? We refer, to our Black students in many of our environments as being scholars. So when we think of our Black scholars, what does that mean in terms of development, personal development, professional development, what? So I am dedicated to making sure that educators understand how to educate our children. That's a major void. And it's so critical. Socioeconomically, it's there. And so I'm just excited, like everybody else, because we have had one messed up education system from the federal level, from the top. It was horrible, and it didn't do a thing except set us back. People have continued to talk about this achievement gap. We don't tend to talk about it as an achievement gap within Minnesota Humanities, but nothing was happening from a national level to help with any kind of gap. So I'm hopeful that we're moving forward and onward.
Yes.
Okay, onward.
Yes.
Yes. That's a good place to put it. This onward, right? For positioning how we explore education. I know, like, even when I was in college, I remember talking about in the education system, how schools are built or prisons are built on 3rd and 4th grade reading levels, math scores. And we're seeing that our children, particularly children of color, are being tracked and positioned in different avenues that they will never get higher. So it starts here, maybe the gap is here. And as we get older and older, it just widens and widens, and it impacts us not just on a educational level, but it impacts our finances, our economic abilities to support and provide for our families, tracks where we live, how we live, the things that we know, and then even our own cultural sensibilities, the knowledge that we have here. And so I'm saying all this to really get into this piece of how do we engage the different players in educating us, our children, because we're talking about raising Black scholars, right? We want to see our children succeed. How do we engage the players effectively in a way that we can get the education that we need to succeed?
Well, let me start a little bit by saying that AALF worked with community for months to look at 4 various categories that impact, our communities. And one of those categories was education. And that's the one that Niila and I kind of gravitated towards, obviously. But one thing I want to say, what evolved out of it, and we'll talk to you about the process of that a little bit later, but this whole measurement of what success is measured against whiteness.
Yes.
And it's set up, it's framed in whiteness, it's measured against whiteness, and therefore we come into it not on a proper playing field. So as we look at this event that we're going to talk about in a minute here, we're trying to help people to understand how to really build success into first the minds of these folks who are the teachers, who are the ones coming from their own frame of operating and functioning. Because, people like to say it's the public schools, But even if you look in the private schools, you're going to find these disparities that exist when it comes to children of color. Right. So no matter where we are, there's always this thing that's happening. So until we understand who we are, have pride in who we are, and have some support to help get us there. That's what we saw last night. That's what was so mesmerizing and dazzling about Miss Amanda Gorman. Miss Amanda Gorman spoke from her confidence level, from her core, that which she had been given to feel good about herself. So, yeah.
She was everything. Yes.
And 22 years old. That changed, it changed it just a little bit when you're like, she's the youngest. And she came and said, look, I am this skinny little girl from parents and descendants of slaves, and I dream of being a president. I'm right here standing in front of my first Black VP. Okay, sorry. Okay.
But this is, here's the thing.
Representation. We can see us.
Here's the thing, though.
Yes.
I think it was, I don't know, Anderson Cooper or somebody who said, how many more are out there just like that? Many more out there. We know that they are. And that's why I wasn't surprised. I was delighted that she got that platform, but I was not surprised that she was able to do what she did, because that brilliance exists.
It's in us.
Even younger.
It exists, as Dr. Stovall says all the time. This whole thing about enough. We're already enough, but we're not given the opportunity to project the enoughness.
Right. Get there. Right.
What we do is like, oh my goodness, that's so amazing. Well, yeah, it's amazing. It's because we are amazing.
Right. We've been here all along, being amazing.
Yes.
But we're not getting this platform to engage, right?
No, that's exactly right. So this idea of not being seen, Rose does such a wonderful job doing storytelling exercises within schools to sort of open up, and every adult impacts the education of a child within a school and taking on that responsibility. But if you mirror back that you don't respect or you don't appreciate that child, and that's what you're going to receive back. And also it's going to feed upon how you interact with the child. I mean, you talk about the disparities, as the former commissioner of the Department of Human Rights, we did a longitudinal study. We examined suspension rates in all school districts in the state of Minnesota. And what we found is that if you were an African-American student, you were 8 times more likely than a white student to be suspended. And people shouldn't take any comfort at all about how bad that is, especially when you take a look at the national average, because the national average is 3.5 times. So in Minnesota, somehow we doubled already a ridiculous number as to the rate of suspensions. For our Indigenous brothers and sisters, it's 10 times more likely. And these aren't for fighting. This is not for drugs. This is the interaction. The most common reason for a kid to be suspended in Minnesota is disruptive conduct. And the way in which the Department of Education reports this, so if it was more serious as to drugs or the fighting, that's how it would be reported. Okay. Mm-hmm. So 38, 39% year in and year out, it's for that. It's the interaction with adults. And how much of that is fed by, unfortunately, the negative stereotypes, bias that has existed within our country. Mm-hmm. So if we don't attack that, if we don't address that, we can't make long-term systemic change. So Rose is absolutely right, but that then requires all of us to be in this game of education. This isn't something we can delegate or pass off to someone else. All of us have to be in it.
That's right.
Okay. How do we get into that? I know we talk about this a lot, and we have communities and pockets of us in our communities that are well versed, not just educated, but can bring all the various aspects of our Blackness, our culture, African American stories into the conversations at home. But we're going to be honest, all parents can't do that. They're not all afforded that opportunity, the time. We got distance learning, computer, technical disparities, other things happening. How do we empower? If we understand that we need to engage, how do we empower parents? How do we give them resources and tools, or the people in the spaces, so that we can move forward, not just as one group that happens to have everything? Where do we come together on that? How do we explore that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the things that AALF, the African American Leadership Forum, has done is created spaces for sharing of best practices and ideas within the community. So often we don't look to community for those respective solutions because they do reside there. Mm-hmm. So that's one part of the respective strategy. And in some ways, this leads into the Realizing Wakanda event. Mm-hmm. And the work stream and the Minnesota Humanities Center creating this particular event, and I'll have Rose and Niila talk more about sort of who would be there, but just the general frame. Okay. The material, the information. Do students see themselves in what's discussed within the classroom, right? Mm-hmm. So men don't like being in audiences where every example would be women. And somehow my white male friends get that. But then when we talk about race, they somehow get confused. There's cognitive dissonance, right? So we've got to break that down, is that for children, if they can see themselves in the stories, they're much more likely to be successful in understanding the lesson that we seek to teach. So I'll turn it over to Niila and to Rose to talk more about Wakanda.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like real life Wakanda, because we don't want an imaginary situation. Like we got to be real life, grounded. How we take that high level concept into like groundwork action.
Absolutely. And I'm so pleased and proud to say that I feel like that's what we did. So when we started in the task force maybe about a year ago, we were really intentional with AALF. Yes, the AALF task force, in which we focused, as Queen Rose shared earlier, on 4 really important focus areas. Education being one, of course, another being health and wellness. I know I'm trying to get family and culture, and then of course economic development. Those are really some 4 pillars that if we can get those things lined up, there's just so much opportunity for those of us in the Black community. And we took some time. Yes, of course, we took some time to maybe do research, but what our research really was connecting with the community, gaining information from their lived experience, gaining information from what do they need? What are they looking for? And I mean, because we have to be honest, Black folks are awesome. We're out there doing things every day for our community. There's all types of organizations that benefit each individual area that I just spoke about. But what ALF really wanted to focus on was bringing together each and every member of that community so that we have a unified voice, so that we have a spectrum of feedback and information that we can use to really determine what is the focus area that we really need to pay close attention to. And, you know, there are other areas, of course, we'll get to them. But what we landed on was really recognizing that the education disparities, as you said, are really becoming greater. And mainstream education is centered in whiteness with mostly white educators. So how do we build the bridge from what we have into what we know we want, which was expressed a need for Black scholars to have access to Black educators, Black curriculum, opportunities for them to see themselves in a good story. And we know how history works. You know, the person who has the power, the person who survived is the one who writes the story. And so we're hoping to create a bridge so that our community will continue to be able to thrive and live and tell the true story about what is happening with our community and where our community is going. And yeah, it was just so exciting to work with ALF, because when we talk about whiteness and we talk about how all the structures and systems are built in whiteness, we used a Black-centered design where we kept Blackness at the center. And we know that how we show up every other day, people are keeping whiteness at the center. Okay. And it was such a beautiful switch to say, nope, not today.
All right, so we're talking about centering Blackness. Woo!
Yes.
Let's come back to that. Like, no, but I mean, sometimes we just have to name a thing, right? Yeah. We talk around, hey, we want to make sure that our people or these communities or whatever it is, and it's like, nah, we are centering Blackness in this conversation. Even we're talking about even of all the students of color being impacted at this very moment, we're talking about that. And I would like to get just a little bit, just for our audience in terms of talking about this realizing Wakanda, because we just threw out Wakanda and then folks is like, wait, the movie, what, Panther, what? So I just want to come back that, you know, Minnesota Humanities Center and ALF, African American Leadership Forum, are putting together a two-day panel. It's a thing. It's a workshop. It's a conversation. It's a get your life situation, right?
Yes.
About how we raise, which is the title of this conversation, about how we really raise Black scholars, how we raise Black students and take some of that ownership. So in that, you know, that may seem a little bit like a whole lot for people. Like if I'm not already in education, if I'm not already an activist or a community organizer, I might click on to this thing and like, is this for me? So tell me, who is this for? And you know, like who's that person? What's her name? What she look like? What's his name? Like, honestly, because sometimes we don't see ourselves in greatness. Remember that representation piece. So we can name who's supposed to be in this conversation and then tell me about what this conversation looks like or this activity looks like. And then we can tell the dates and we'll share the links and everything, but we want to get into it.
I want to go back to what you said about what we don't tend to see and recognize. That's how we came up with the name, Realizing Wakanda. Because if you think about it, it seems like everybody was so energized after that movie, right? Mm-hmm. People were showing up, they were dressing up, and they were there, and they were excited. Why? I wanted to say, why are people so excited about this? There are movies out there. There are other stories out there. They were excited about seeing the brilliance. Yes. There was brilliance that was, it wasn't, yes, it had a lot of the stereotypical things, but the stereotypical things came about because of the quest for what? More of this to be spread among Black people. And so when you think about that strength that the Panther had, and you think about the power that the whole community was accessible to, everybody, whenever there was something that came up, all of the citizens of Wakanda came together, right? And that's what we're missing. We're missing everybody coming together around this issue and sticking to it, and being committed and dedicated to it. So the presenters that are coming
wait,
in.
what is it, first of all? Because folks still don't know what it is. Come on.
Well,
you excited?
First of all, yeah. And see, this is why, this thing with fiction, what's fiction and what's real. So I was kind of describing what was happening in the universe of Wakanda. And that's why people were so excited, Black people, because they saw something that they weren't getting.
Right.
But it also offered the possibilities of what could be. And so what we're trying to do now through this forum, you can refer to it as a forum from now on.
Okay.
It's a forum. It's a 2-day forum. And we're going to tell you how we got there because the process was amazing. So Ms. Niila can start with that. What was the problem identified?
That's right. Well, I tell you what, before we even jump there, we did what exactly you asked about is we identified our audience. Who do we need to pay attention to? Who is the focus? And who are we doing this work for? And it's exactly who the audience has been welcomed to this event is who we focused on. And that, again, Black scholars, educators of Black scholars, and caregivers. And so anyone who cares about a Black scholar, anyone who has a Black scholar in their home, anyone who is an educator, whether you're teaching Black scholars now or not, because listen, we're here and you at some point will teach us if you're an educator. And so we need you to show up for us. Don't show up how you've been showing up for everyone else all along. You need to show up for us. And so the forum is an opportunity to help everyone get on that page, help educators see where the opportunities are for them to do better, for guardians and caregivers to see where are some resources and tools where I can do better. And then, of course, for our scholars, for them to see that diamond that lives in them is called success. That diamond that lives in them is called greatness. It's called a dynasty. And we have to make sure that they see it. And so that's what this event is about. It's showing the greatness of the Black community, but connecting and making sure that people can see the bridge from where we are to where we're going. And again, the work we've done to really provide scaffolding to what this is going to look like has been great. It's been ongoing work with different communities and really making sure we're bringing people into the fold so that, listen, if you've been in education and you've been doing this work, jump on the train with us because we're pumping, we're going, but we need all of the support and people that we can get.
Okay.
I think it's fair to say that individuals who have scholars, students, and they're trying to figure out how to navigate within the system, there is going to be information for you. Okay. How we teach as an educator, there will be information for you. Okay. How we can think about a frame and jointly work together, there will be space and information for you. Okay. So no one should think that there's not going to be an opportunity to have a space made for them. We understand that this is something that we need everyone in all areas to be in. So wherever you are on the spectrum, there will be something for you there.
Okay. So I'm hearing if you got a kid with you, if you see somebody's kid, if you interface with somebody's child, if you know a child,
come on,
you should be part of this conversation or in this forum. Let me. So it's an interactive forum. And what does that day look? Okay, so I know we get into the Wakanda-ness of it, right? Mm-hmm. But for the hard pieces, what does this day look like? And what, I know there's a problem solved, there's a problem statement. So what problem are you looking to solve? So let's if we can get that would be really great. Like, what's that problem? Because there's so many problems, right? When we talk about the things that are impacting us, there's so many issues. So when we're centering Blackness, what's the thing that you're looking at doing? Is it addressing the high school graduation rates where we're the lowest in the nation? Are we looking at, I mean, because someone asked in the comments, like, what's the gap breakdown? And I just want to just put the lowest. Pick a number or pick a thing and it's going to be the lowest for us and it's widening. And that's really sad to say that. But so what are you looking at? Like, is there a specific piece that you're looking at to touch on? And then what's that problem? And then how do you drive into solution? Yeah. Rose?
Nyla is going to share what the problem is and what our goal is.
Computers for us,
I
right?
want to jump in on Al's work stream leader here. She's done fantastic
Okay,
work.
great. Got it.
Yeah, so a moment ago, I did share what we came up with as a work stream, what our problem statement was. And it was really, again, rooted in the fact that the systems that our scholars are navigating in, it is centered in whiteness. And so what we hope to do is to really uproot that plant and plant a new seed of Black-centered design, and everything that scholars, educators, and guardians do, centering that Black child and making sure that any activity, action, interaction, engagement, it is centering that child. And I mean, even if I think back to the book of Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting on one side of the cafeteria, I don't remember the title exactly, but there's that is what we are helping to resolve, that we're not, producing the forum to say this is one specific antidote to a specific problem. It's more of, we want to give you the resources and tools that you need so that when something comes up for you and you need to recenter your child, or you need to recenter what your needs are for your Black student, you know what to do, maybe who to ask, and what resources to utilize.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's powerful too, because too often we think that education is about memorizing certain facts. Education is about nurturing the spirit, the soul of the individual, so they are empowered to be a productive solving of problems adult. How do you do that? You've got to nurture that spirit within the child. So if we don't center them in that, where do they find that as an adult?
And that's where now we're hearing a few more anyway, white teachers, when they go through the work that we do, Minnesota Humanities, it's like a light bulb comes on, and they now are trying to figure out how to go back and reconstruct their curriculum, reconstruct what they now have been doing one way all this time. And now they need to figure out, okay, let me just back up here and start over. That's what we want them to do. We want them to acknowledge. We're not trying to shame them out. But we are trying to help them to understand, you need to understand that the way that you are expecting these students to behave is from your own way of operating. And that is something. In addition to that, Black people need to understand what it is that they need to understand, because many Black people don't know. We have leaned on certain, now I'm talking scholars in terms of adults who are our griots, so to speak. We lean on somebody like Dr. Mahmoud El-Kadi, who has taught the heck out of us into understanding who we are and from whence we've come, like no one else has ever here in this little area that we're in. Yes, people do understand how to go and find some history. And let me tell you this too. A lot of white people do more of that than a lot of Black people do. A lot of white people, and that's another thing about all of this, is how white scholars will go and find this stuff and write the books, and then they become the experts in stuff
on us.
About us.
Hip-hop.
It's across, it's not just in education, it's in every genre. And that's the thing that's so interesting too. But again, we're in an environment, in a society where whiteness is the measurement and whiteness is the that, right? So I think when I want to go back and say something that is really important, and that's the process that ALF used to get us to this. And going through that process is something that needs to be modeled, because it's hard for folks to step in and it's like, okay, we've already done this, now you take it. I'll be darned if everybody doesn't want to go back to the beginning. No, we're not doing that. You're going to take it from here. And now we're going to move on, and we're going to move on. So this work stream, Niila and I were in, like 7 to 8 months. And then came that group in April who helped identify, based upon that problem statement, what it is that we should be doing. So they came up with the theme, if you will, Ms. Harmon. They came up with the thing. And the thing was going to be a conference or a forum. And then another group came in and took it from there. And they worked for the last 6-7 months to come up with the content. So the content is now what we're about to roll out on February 2nd and 3rd from 5:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. And in there, back there somewhere, somebody said, all right, a part of this process means you've got to find an organization who's going to take it and resource it. And that's when we said Minnesota Humanities is already doing this work. And so Minnesota Humanities said, okay, yep, we'll do it. And that means now that all of the resources and the expenses, if you will, that does come through the Minnesota Humanities Center, which is good, that we can do what we need to do and roll it out and not have to be concerned about where's the money going to come from.
Okay.
Now, a controversial thing that has come up recently that my executive director doesn't even know about, that we're kind of dealing with behind the scenes, is a very valid one. We've got some folks now who are coming forth and saying, because of this necessity, because of this thing being so important, we shouldn't have to pay for it then. Well, here we go with this way of operating and this way of thinking as we move through what do we do and how much do we take ownership and what do we do? So we're going back and we're reassessing that. We're not charging much. It's only, can I say what we charge on this?
No, but it's not. I mean,
much.
you guys, you can click the link, but I mean, what's much to one person is a lot.
Yeah, I know.
Community, right?
And that's my point. I'm saying, but no one, let me say this, will be turned away.
Right.
That's the key thing to understand. Okay. No one will be turned away.
Okay.
So there you have it.
Let's talk about this. No one, like, so this thing, right? So we get high level concept, it's centering Blackness. I get that it's this piece. And I know someone asked about this percentage. I'm just going to say quick. We know that we have about 5 or 6%, somewhere between 5 and 6% teachers of color in the entire state of Minnesota. But there are 34% students of color, right? You know, the 6, I forgot what the percentage is for Blacks in general, but we know that
on the 5%.
Pardon?
I said you might be generous on the 5%.
On the 5, well, I just pulled up the Federal Reserve Bank just dropped a new
but I'll take
report. Yes, it's 5.2. I'm sorry, it's 5.2%. 5.2% is what was in 2019. So we're looking at that, right? And we're talking centering Blackness. What are the things? Like, what is the like, give me like 2 solid, concrete, I know I'm going to come here and get this that's tangible to me. Because everybody can't deal in high level. The ethereal concept. Some folks is just like, so you're gonna teach me how to teach my kid when this internet, and I wish they would turn this on and work the Zoom. Or do you understand what I'm saying? Because these are, and we hear it from the teacher side too, where teachers are, whether they white or Black or wherever, are stressed right now in the midst of a pandemic. Because if they're in school, they're stressed about, if this kid gonna give me COVID-19, am I gonna give it's so many things happen. It's a confluence of stuff happening on top of the disparities we already have. So I'm wondering if you could give me like, this is one thing we're gonna touch on that I know as a parent I can walk away with. We got the teachers know they're gonna have to rewrite their curriculum. We got that. For the rest of the folks that are coming in, because this is a community forum and conversation, what can you give me 2 more things?
Yeah.
Yes.
I can talk to that, but I want, Niila certainly to jump in it as well as Kevin. Day 1, we're going to focus on Black brilliance, the origins. So participants will understand how to explore Black diaspora, African American history, and the whole Pan-African experience, and to deepen that and broaden that. And we've got some phenomenal presenters leading that. Dr. Brian Lazinski, and he's just really dynamic in that area. We also have Dr. Christopher Lehman, who will serve as a resource. He has this amazing book about the history of slavery's reach is what it's called. But basically, it's talking about the history of slavery in Minnesota. And then day 2, we're going to focus on fostering and promoting the cultural and racial identities of Black scholars. And so participants are going to understand how to define the culture and understand what their role is as they play in this identity development, and to understand how to create a space to cultivate positive identities. The interesting thing about both days, when we talked about that group that came together back in April, those participants were people who are doing this work. They're doing this work in the community or somewhere in schools or universities already. So what's going to happen each night is we'll have 3 tracks, and each track, and I'll shut up and let Niila talk about this a little bit, but these resource people will be in those spaces to talk about who they are and what they do and what they have to offer. I'll pass it on to Niila.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Queen McGee, because I think you gave a good synopsis of what some of the, different topical areas we'll be covering. But let me just keep it real, Ms. Harmon. Listen, we're putting on a forum for us, by us, and with us. And whenever we're putting on something, listen, who doesn't want to be there? We're going to have networking. We're going to have resources. We have some music, honey. We're going to have some performances. I mean, it is definitely an event where you'll be engaged, you'll be, captivated. And it's not, it's like when you're being invited to a party. You may not know what the flavor of the cake is going to be, but when you get there, you know you're going to have a good time. And when I was a part of the conversations as we planned this, I just continue to be really excited because we're going to give participants information to really help them start maybe thinking about things that they haven't maybe had the time, the capacity, or just even thoughts about. And we're going to give them a call to action because, listen, this is important. And if you want to take the time to show up and just learn a little bit more about how you can be a good benefit, a good role model, a supporter of the scholar in your home or in someone else's home, why not take the time out and learn from some experts, get some resources, and get entertained?
And it's not just for Black educators. It's for anybody who is touching the lives of Black scholars. So that's question came up to us today. Is this only for Black? Nope. It's for anyone who is touching the lives of how Black children are learning.
Okay.
I'm so glad you said that because I think I was a little exclusive earlier, but I just love my Black folks, so I'll give a little shout out.
So this is I pull up if I come to this I say come when I log on to this virtual world here. I'm able to ask questions. I'm able to interact with the speakers and presenters. Is there a Q&A time? Okay, awesome. Because that's the thing. Because folks got questions. And
the power of the event is really that there will be space made available for folks to ask those respective questions. And again, wherever you are as a parent or just someone who's passionate about supporting a young Black scholar, you can ask those questions about how you can make a positive difference in their respective life.
Okay.
So all the individuals that were part of the work stream, part of this process, they're coming to it to openly share the information, best ideas, best practices that they have.
Okay. And for folks who are just tuning in right now, MSR Forefront, we're talking Raising Black Scholars. We're talking a new event that's hosted by or presented by the Minnesota Humanities Center and African American Leadership Forum. It's called Realizing Wakanda, Educating and Nurturing the Brilliance of Our Black Scholars. And we're really talking our Black students. We're talking centering Blackness. We're talking how do we as a community, as the people who touch the lives of Black students, help to close this gap, this disparity gap. And a lot of that comes through empowering and engaging our communities. Yes. It's not just sending our kids to school and expecting them to come home with everything that they need. It's not possible. It's just not going to happen. We can be mad at the system. We can be mad at the number of teachers of color. We can be mad at the number of children graduating high school, like the graduation rates. But we also have to take a different kind of ownership. If that's what I'm hearing. It's not just saying that we have to take the ownership and let the public school system continue to fail us, but even as it's educating us, we need to be able to, if we don't have it, to connect with the community resources to move forward. Right? Did I get it all right? Awesome. So I'm going to also say, if anyone has questions for our panel right now, please definitely, our roundtable, I should say, drop a comment, drop a question if you have something. I know we have one right now that's just saying, what do you need? And how can the community support? Like, what do you need to make this a success? What do you need to get this off the ground so it's not just, hey, we did something, but that you're doing something when this is over? Yeah.
Right.
So I think one of the things which is going to go forward, just so that your audience is aware of this, is that the state of Minnesota at this moment in time is reviewing its social studies curriculum. So there's going to be an opportunity for your audience to lend in their voice and to impact that curriculum that's going to come from the Department of Education. So the committee has been advocating for the addition of ethnic studies within the social studies standards.
Okay.
So to the extent that you're represented, there's an opportunity for folks to lean in if they think that's a good idea, and to make their voice known, make their voice heard on this respective issue. And I think this is also something that we heard within the work stream. So we're very happy to be able to help facilitate community voice within this space on that issue.
Okay. Well, that's amazing right there. I know someone else asked about program capacity. I'm assuming it's virtual, so it's unlimited, but please let us know. And is this for students as well? Can they attend? Is this accommodating for them as well? And what's that age range? Like, what's the age?
That's a good question.
What age do children begin to learn? That's what I would say. And I say that because I'm going to take you back again to Miss Gorman last night. I keep saying last night, yesterday. You know, when our students are exposed, our scholars are exposed early, I think Kevin was alluding to that earlier, we know that they're soaking up knowledge all around. I mean, we hear it all the time, why children can be bilingual at 2 and 3 years old. It's because they're hearing it and they're soaking it in. So what we have to do is begin to put the positive things in a position for our children to soak in. And the sooner we do that, the better. Now, you're going to be at home. Your children are going to be at home. Now, if your child can sit there and be attentive, we want them to be. Please. We want them to participate. And yes, if they need to get up and go, then let them go. And if they feel like coming back and sitting in for a while, let them come back and sit in for a while. Okay. So that's how we're looking at it. And again, I want to really emphasize, we are not turning anyone away.
Okay. So what does that mean if you're not? So I click on this and it says register and I don't got the money. What if I do or don't? I'm just, what does that mean? Do I contact someone or?
Yes. And we have a name there.
Okay.
For the person to contact. And yeah.
So that's good to know that if there is a financial need, you can contact the person that's listed there, Eden Bart, and ask additional information. So what does success look like for this? That's a question I'm getting right now. What are the metrics for success? I know in terms of there's a continuing education conversation and social studies curriculum. That's huge. Yeah. That's huge in and of itself.
Really huge. Yes, it is.
What are maybe individual metrics, even for some, I attend this. What's a metric of success for me?
So I think one of the things coming out of this, I'll speak globally for the Humanities Center. So we've had 1 or 2 school districts explore the idea of embedding ethnic studies ahead of the state. So, and we do fortunately have some superintendents that might be open to the idea. So that would be really encouraging, because even if the Commissioner of Education says that she wishes to implement ethnic studies, it still has to go through administrative rulemaking. So that's going to be at least a year out.
Okay.
So getting the coalition of the willing and the supportive among superintendents on that issue would be really something important to see. And I think we have the 50th anniversary of Chicano Latino Studies at the University of Minnesota, and folks are partnering with organizations such as the Humanities to uplift those respective stories. If we're carrying stories for the indigenous folks in our state, there is no reason why we can't tell a complete history of our country as opposed to a partial history. And it's final to underscore this. I mean, the prior president had issued a report called 1776. I would encourage people to go to the New York Times to see how he was thinking that he wanted to write the history of our country. And that was one of the things that the current president has stepped back from. And we're thankful for that, because that framing would have been very hurtful and detrimental to us.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'm looking back here. The people are dropping comments, and it's interesting. Someone just said that they had, their school was one of the best schools in the city, and they were really just talking about that the principals were doctors of education, Black community members. And it goes back to this piece about representation, visibility. The reason why folks are excited about a Black VP she's a woman, she Black, she Indian. Like, what I mean? She checks so many boxes, like so many different, and everybody claiming her as theirs. Like, she the first Black, she AKA, do you understand? Like, there are so many communities claiming her because of the power of representation. And so I'm curious how this is being connected and communicated to the community, how in terms of that representation. I know we talk about that centering Blackness. How will we see this shared, or even after this happens? Because you're going to have so much content that's available. Will we be able to see how will it be shared outside of just this day?
We're excited that
or these 2 days, sorry.
We know the importance of having something that people can take away.
Yes.
So we have Mary Taras, who owns Strive Publishing. She's going to be collecting all of the information, the presenters' information, their resource materials, etc., and packaging that for us in a way that participants will now have this resource to go back on. And for people who perhaps didn't make it, they'll have something that they can look at now. And we'll look in the future to how this can be grown greater. But just talking for this 2-day forum, that's the intent, is for her to work at gathering this information together and packaging it for us so that we'll be able to have it as a handout, if you will, to people virtually, online, or digitally, I suppose, or as a handout, hard copy. And we're proud of that. But the other thing I want to stress, all of this stuff that's happening that got us to this negative perception of whatever it is did not happen overnight. This took centuries. So therefore, to continue the process that ALF laid out so beautifully, and where we are now is this stage of it, it will have to be moved on. And how it gets moved on, we will have to have folks who will assist Minnesota Humanities, ALF, in terms of what the next step is beyond this. So it won't just be after February 2 and 3, we're done, y'all. You got it all. Here's your little handout. Goodbye.
When I saved? Okay, got you. Okay.
Yeah. So that's what's to be determined.
Okay. So this leads into, I'm going to make this the final question. It's a great question from comments here in terms of knowing that it's not going to happen overnight. What does it look like to you? And if you talked about your role in education, we're going to close this out. What does it look like for this gap in our education, in the current system, to be closed? What does that look like for you? What are the, not talking about the graduation rates, but what does that look like for those gaps for us? How does that impact us as a community for that education gap to be closed, or at least, shrunk down a little bit?
Well, if closing sort of the education gap, and stating it this way, ensuring that every Black child maximizes their chances for success because they have been given the tools during their formal education. If that were to happen, then instead of having the median income from African American family being $28,500 or $29,000 a year, it would be significantly greater. And when we talk about having home ownership at 28%, and again, this is not to discount the horrendous impact of redlining, or not having wealth being transferred to you from your parents on the same average as sort of white individuals, we would be growing equity through home ownership. These things we would be making progress on. What does it look like? So Dr. Christopher Lehman, Minnesota Book Award, folks would be knowing all throughout the entire state of the incredible work and scholarship that is going on. We would see stories being told as it relates to second and third grade level. So this idea of what you were talking about with Governor Brown making the pronouncement of being able to know how many prisons are built in California in the early 70s by knowing what is a third grade reading level, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because there would be a host of, and I appreciate the establishment of the early onset of African-American bookstores within our state, but we'd be having so many of those, and we'd have rich conversations about the respective stories. And we wouldn't be challenged, and we wouldn't be threatened by the fact of someone having a conversation about forming a more perfect union. Did it start in the 60s, or did it start back in 1776? We would actually have a full participation within the democracy. So to me, when we're moving toward and bending that moral arc in the universe toward justice, I would be able to see it because some of those things would be present.
Okay. Realizing Wakanda. That's it.
Okay. Yeah. Before you check out, I just want to mention how honored we are to have the presenters that we're having, to have all of these community educators who are going to be with us, to have the talent to open it up. We have a teacher from Roseville who's going to be leading a conversation with students. And these students are going to tell us what it is that they are missing. And we're going to hear from parents who are telling us what they're missing. So it's really important that we understand the importance of listening and offering space for people to talk and share their stories. That's really critical. One thing I know that we have been impressing upon community for years now, and we're seeing it, but we need to see it more, and we need to see it with consistency. And that is for our professionals, our Black professionals, to give your time and energy back into community. It is so important. Often, we get well educated and then we're gone, and it's only about self. Honestly, you've got to figure how to give of your time back into community where it's so desperately needed. I remember years ago when segregation was lifted. Yeah, I may be that old. And one of the things that we saw happen was the brilliance of our community was stripped away from our communities in order to integrate corporations. And while that was a great thing to see and do, that corporate America was now bringing in some Black folks, they were also taking away the brilliance, because who they went after were the teachers, because those were the folk who were the educated, right? And off they went. And it's been one of those things that sort of made it like this over time. How do we bring that back? I look at the Gullah communities, some of them anyway. Many folk left those islands after they finally got a chance to leave because they were sick of being stranded away from the mainland. But there is this resurgence where they're returning. And that's the thing. How do we return? How do we return? And that is how a Wakanda can be built.
Okay. And then Niila, that last piece of what that gap widening, what closing the gap looks like for you.
I'd say for me, it's children who feel welcomed and valued in their place of learning. And they have opportunities very similar to what Kevin said. They have opportunities to be great. And the people who are stewarding their greatness keep them at the center and make sure that it's not about what does this group need, what does this student need? And I think if we can move back to that, because everything you were saying, Queen Rose, when you think about that, when you think about before Brown versus the Board of Education and how well the Black community was doing in educating the Black community, can we return to some resemblance of that care, that love, that interest that educators had in students? And that when that happens, that's when I feel like we'll be getting closer to zero gap.
Awesome. Well, I want to say thank you all. We try to keep it this hour for joining in this conversation. I want to thank our audience for tuning in as well. And then just lay back down or to lay back into this part of it where we're talking education, and it's not just education. It's the whole idea of social justice. Something, Kevin, you told me 2 years ago or a year and a half ago when I first interviewed you. We're talking social justice. We're talking even economic or racial justice and economic justice related to education. All of these things are tied in together. And there's something that Kevin said, actually, that held true. You said to the extent that people can control their narrative, they have a better chance of controlling their destiny. And part of controlling that narrative is being in the space to speak it, write it, and share it. And that comes through our education. And so that's what I hope that we continue to gather in this conversation. And I'm seeing that as something that you all are looking towards, uplifting and exciting people to get involved in terms of education with realizing Wakanda. It's not just going to be books on books on books, but how do you engage and empower to get to that point of education? So yeah, I'll tune in, check the link in our comments if you want more information on, it's called Realizing Wakanda, taking place February 2nd and 3rd. It's online, virtual, you don't have to go anywhere. If you got your kids, put them on your lap, put them in the room. And then be sure to ask additional questions. We will definitely share them and connect back with you all. But again, thank you, Rose, Kevin, Nyla, for sharing your time and your energy. Yes.
Stephanie, thank you so much.
Thank you. Absolutely. This is a great edition of the MSR Forefront. Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go. I'm going to do a quick